My name is Jonathan Miller. I'm 52 years old, and for more than 30 of those years, I was known as the advertising guy. I started as an intern at a small agency in rural Missouri and slowly worked my way up. With sacrifice, sleepless nights, coffee replacing meals, and countless business trips, I earned a respected title, creative director at one of the largest marketing agencies in New York City. My business card carried weight. I was proud of it. In fact, I think I was that card. My life was my work. I woke up and went to bed thinking about slogans, campaigns, impactful visuals. I was well known in the industry, and of course I felt important. I became the provider for my family, a mentor to younger colleagues, and a guide for new talent. I was what people call a career man. And then, all of a sudden, I wasn't. It happened on a grey Tuesday. One of those days when the sky itself seems to warn you that something bad is coming. I walked into the CEO's office with a folder full of ideas for a new international client and found two serious faces from the HR department sitting there. It didn't take long. "Jonathan, the company's going through restructuring. We're making cuts. Unfortunately, today will be your last day." It hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. "What do you mean?" was all I managed to say, still standing, still thinking there must be some mistake. But there wasn't. I walked out of that office with a box in my hands and a hollow feeling in my chest. The office that had been my second home for so long now, it felt cold and unfamiliar, full of pitying glances and awkward silences. Co-workers avoided eye contact. A few gave me sympathetic pats on the back and muttered, "Hang in there," like I'd just lost someone. And maybe I had. I lost my routine, I lost my purpose. And more than that, I lost my identity. Who was I without that badge? How would I introduce myself now, at parties or casual meetups with old friends? "Hi, I'm Jonathan. I used to work at XYZ agency until I got let go. I didn't want to be that guy, but I was. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger. In the first few days at home, I tried to keep it together. I told my wife, Karen, that I'd use the time to rest, reset, reflect on new projects. But inside, I was drowning in shame. Deep shame. How could I, the one who always had the answers, the strong one, be unemployed? The bills kept coming. Rent for our Manhattan apartment, our daughter Emily's college tuition, car payments, health insurance. Every invoice screamed, "You failed," and I believed it. I began isolating myself. I ignored calls, stopped going out, slept poorly, woke up worse. Bit by bit, I stopped shaving. Then, I stopped changing clothes. My days blurred together. Monday, Thursday, Sunday, all the same. Time stood still. I was stuck, frozen, like the world had moved on and left me behind. And the worst part? I started to believe I deserved it. Slowly, the calls from friends faded away. No one wants to be around someone who's fallen, do they? Everyone loves a new success story. But the ex-creative director, now lost and directionless, wasn't inspiring anymore. Even Karen began to look at me differently. She tried to be encouraging, said it was just a phase, but I saw the concern in her eyes, the fear, and maybe even a little disappointment. I started having crying spells. Out of nowhere, a TV commercial, a song from Better Days, or just plain silence. That's when the darkness fully settled in. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something deeper, like a hole pulling me further and further away from who I used to be. I stopped eating, lost over 20 pounds in just a few weeks. I avoided mirrors. I avoided life. I became a ghost inside my own home, and that's when, for the first time, I heard the word I had always associated with other people, depression. But now it had an address, and it was mine. If this story is touching you in any way, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This simple gesture means a lot to our work and encourages us to keep sharing real, deep, and human stories. Stories that offer comfort, spark reflection, and remind us that no one is truly alone. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence matters, always. I wish I could tell you I snapped out of it quickly, that I stood up one morning, looked in the mirror and said, "Enough, I'm going to take my life back." But that's not how it happened. The truth is, the silence became my companion. A heavy, suffocating presence that followed me from room to room. And I let it. Karen tried. She really did. She would leave breakfast on the table even when I didn't eat. She'd open the curtains to let in some light. She suggested we take walks together, but most days I just stared at the wall. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out to say, "Help me, I'm drowning." But the other part, the one that had worn the suit and tie for decades, was ashamed to admit weakness. Men like me weren't supposed to break, supposed. We were raised to be providers, fixers, leaders, not the ones needing support. And so I said nothing. I smiled when necessary, gave short answers when spoken to, and avoided any conversation that might lead to "How are you really doing, Jonathan?" Because the truth was, I wasn't doing well at all. One morning, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I barely recognized myself. My eyes were sunken, my skin pale, my shoulders hunched like I was carrying bricks on my back. That moment should have been a wake-up call, but instead I turned away. I couldn't look. I didn't want to see what I had become. Then came the financial reality. Our savings were vanishing fast. My severance was modest, barely enough for 3 months of rent. Karen started working more hours at the school where she taught, and Emily called less often, sensing the tension at home. I tried applying for jobs, but each time I opened my resume, a wave of panic hit. What would I say in interviews? That I was let go after 30 years, that I was too old, too broken. I remember one interview in particular. It was for a smaller agency. The manager was young, probably 30, if that. He looked at my resume and said, "Wow, you've done a lot. But we're looking for someone who can keep up with fast-paced trends. TikTok, meme culture, that sort of thing." I nodded politely, but inside I crumbled. I walked out of there feeling invisible, irrelevant, like the world had moved on and I had missed the train. That night, I sat alone on the balcony. The city lights blinked in the distance, mocking me with their rhythm. I thought about my father, how he had worked at the same factory until the day he died. There was a time when loyalty meant something, when years of service were rewarded. But now it felt like experience was a liability, not an asset. And then something shifted. Not a lightning bolt, not an epiphany, just a quiet moment. Karen came out and sat beside me. She didn't say much, just placed her hand on mine and whispered, "You're still here, and I still believe in you." I didn't cry, not that time, but I felt something stir inside me, a small flicker. Hope, maybe, or maybe just the reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. The next morning, I made coffee for the first time in weeks. I shaved. I put on a clean shirt. It felt strange, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. But Karen noticed. She smiled. And that made me want to try again the next day. I started walking, just around the block at first, then to the park. I'd sit on a bench and watch people go by, some rushing, others laughing, a few lost in their phones. Life was happening all around me, and slowly I began to want to be a part of it again. I'm not going to say I snapped out of depression. That's not how it works. It clings to you. Some days it loosens its grip, other days it drags you back. But I began to fight. Not with grand gestures, but with small acts, making the bed, answering a text, reading a chapter of a book. I started writing in a journal, not for anyone else, just for me. It helped clear the fog. Karen suggested I speak to someone, a therapist. At first I resisted, but eventually I went. And it was the first time in months I said out loud, "I'm not okay." The therapist didn't try to fix me. She listened. And that alone was healing. I realized I had spent so long being strong for everyone else that I had forgotten how to be honest with myself. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time I wasn't walking it alone, and that, I'd learn, would make all the difference. Therapy became a part of my weekly routine. At first, I didn't know what to say. I sat there, hands clenched, voice low, trying to explain a storm I couldn't see but could feel every day. But week after week, something changed. I stopped talking about just the job and started talking about myself, about how I had spent decades defining my worth by titles, results, and recognition. I had mistaken career for character. No one had taught me how to exist without applause. My therapist, Dr. Whitman, helped me see something I hadn't realized. She said, "Jonathan, you didn't lose your identity. You lost a role. There's a difference." That sentence echoed in my head for days. I had never separated who I was from what I did. Without the job, I thought I was no one. But maybe, just maybe, I could be more. Karen remained my anchor. Some nights we'd talk, really talk, like we used to when we were newlyweds. About dreams we'd buried, about places we wanted to see. She told me she had always admired my drive, but what she loved most now was my vulnerability. "You're letting me in," she said once, tears in her eyes. And I realized I had never done that before. I had been the strong one, the provider, but not the partner, not really. I started volunteering at a local youth center just a few hours a week. At first, it felt like a distraction, a way to get out of the apartment. But soon, I found myself connecting with the kids. They were full of ideas and energy, but most lacked direction. I saw myself in them, the young version of me who needed someone to believe in him. One afternoon, a teenager named Malik asked, "Mr. Miller, how do you know what you're supposed to do in life?" I paused. That question had haunted me for months, but for the first time, I had an answer. "I don't think you always know," I told him, "but I think you find pieces of the answer in the people you help, the things that light you up inside, and the moments when you forget to check your phone because you're fully present." It was a simple conversation, but it stayed with me. As I continued to rebuild, I stopped chasing jobs that mirrored my past and started exploring opportunities that fit who I was becoming. I took a part-time role teaching marketing at a community college. It didn't pay much, it didn't come with a fancy office. But every time I stood in front of that classroom, sharing my experience, answering questions, seeing eyes light up with understanding, I felt alive. Karen would pack me lunch some mornings. We'd laugh about how we had switched roles. She working full-time, me going off to school. But there was joy in that shift. A new rhythm, a shared purpose. There were still hard days. Days when the old voice crept in, "You're not successful anymore. You peaked. This is a step down." But now I had tools to silence that voice. I had perspective. I had support. One evening, while grading assignments at the kitchen table, I looked at Karen and said, "You know, I'm not who I used to be." She looked up and smiled. "I know, and I love who you're becoming." That moment stayed with me. Not everything was fixed. We had to move to a smaller apartment. We cut back on luxuries. But there was a strange peace in that. Less pressure, more clarity, and most importantly, more connection. I began journaling again, not just my struggles, but my wins too. I wrote about the joy of walking without rushing, the warmth of a good conversation, the pride of seeing a student succeed. I stopped measuring my days in achievements and started measuring them in meaning. Looking back, I understand now, the layoff didn't break me. It stripped away the noise. And in that silence, I found a voice I didn't know I had, a softer voice, a truer one. By the time I reached the end of my first semester teaching, Something had changed inside me. I no longer felt like a man trying to escape the shadow of his former life. I felt like someone growing roots in new soil. The classroom had become a sanctuary. The students, with their questions and curiosity, were no longer strangers. They were a reminder that knowledge has power, and that wisdom, when shared, can outlive titles and corner offices. But still, there were moments, quiet, unexpected ones, when the weight of the past would return. I'd be riding the subway and suddenly think about the office on the 32nd floor, the view of the city skyline, the morning coffees with my old team. I missed it, yes. Not just the job, but the version of me who walked through those glass doors every day feeling like he belonged. I didn't pretend those feelings didn't exist. I learned to sit with them. Dr. Whitman helped me understand that grieving a career is real. It's like mourning a life you had spent decades building. The rituals, the identity, the meaning you gave to every hour. It doesn't disappear without leaving a mark. Karen, as always, was patient with me. She never forced me to move on. Instead, she encouraged me to move through it. And that made all the difference. One day, she brought home an old photo album from the attic. Inside were pictures of our early days, me in my 20s, full of ambition, her with that same light in her eyes. We laughed at our hairstyles, the oversized suits, the awkward smiles, but then we paused on one picture. It was me holding our newborn daughter, Emily, my tie crooked, my face exhausted, but proud. That was the day you stayed up all night. After she was born, Karen said, you went straight to work afterward because you had a pitch meeting. You were already carrying more than anyone realized. That hit me. I had always worn my dedication like a badge of honor. But I never stopped to acknowledge the toll it took. Not just on me, but on my family. I had missed birthdays, dinners, even vacations, all in the name of success. And now, years later, I was finally seeing what I had traded. That night, I wrote something in my journal that I still read to this day. I was never just my job. I was also a husband, a father, a friend, and I forgot that. The more I wrote, the more I healed, not because writing solved everything, but because it gave shape to my emotions. And when you name your pain, you begin to take away its power. 1. Afternoon, after class, a student named Rachel stayed behind. She hesitated, then said, Professor Miller, I've been struggling with anxiety. I don't know how to tell anyone. I thought, maybe you'd understand. She didn't know my story, but somehow she sensed it. I looked at her and said gently, you're not alone, and you're not broken. What you're feeling is real, but it doesn't define you. She nodded, tears in her eyes. That conversation reminded me why I was there, why this new path mattered. It wasn't about rebuilding a career. It was about reclaiming purpose. That weekend, I decided to do something I had avoided for over a year. I met up with some of my old co-workers. We had lunch at a quiet cafe. At first, I felt the old shame creeping in. Would they pity me? Would they see me as the man who lost it all? But to my surprise, they were warm, curious. One of them, Mark, said, Honestly, Jonathan, I admire what you've done. You reinvented yourself. Most people don't have that kind of courage. I didn't know what to say. Courage? I had felt like a failure for so long. But maybe I had been brave enough to feel, brave enough to fall apart, and brave enough to rebuild differently. That day, I walked home with a strange feeling, not pride exactly, but peace. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking towards something new, something real. Spring came early that year. The trees along the sidewalk outside our apartment bloomed with a quiet beauty I hadn't noticed before. Maybe they'd always bloomed like that, or maybe I had simply never slowed down enough to see it. That's what healing had given me, eyes that noticed the little things again. The way Karen hummed while cooking, The way sunlight painted gold across our living room rug in the afternoon, the laughter of kids playing in the park, small things. But they anchored me. I had spent over 3 decades believing that success came with accolades, business cards, and performance bonuses. But now success looked different. It was waking up without dread. It was being present at dinner. It was reading a book without checking emails between chapters. And yes, it was learning to breathe again, slowly and without guilt. I began speaking at local events, sharing my story with those who felt like I once did, lost, ashamed, stuck. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't pretend to. But I had lived through the storm, and sometimes that's enough to light someone else's path. After one of those talks, a man approached me. He looked like he was holding back tears. "I thought I was the only one," he said. "I was let go 3 months ago. Haven't told anyone but my wife. I felt useless." I shook his hand and replied, "You're not useless. You're human. And you're still here. That counts for more than you know." I saw in his eyes what I had once seen in the mirror, the desperation, the fear, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. And they do. Not overnight, not perfectly, but day by day. Karen and I took a weekend trip to a small cabin upstate, a place we'd always talked about visiting but never had time for. We left our phones off. We sat by a fireplace. We walked in the woods. And one morning, as we drank coffee on the porch, she turned to me and said, "You're lighter now, not just physically, but in spirit." She was right. I had let go of the crushing need to prove myself to the world. I no longer feared being forgotten because I had found meaning outside of the spotlight. Emily graduated that summer. I watched her cross the stage with pride swelling in my chest. Afterward, she hugged me and whispered, "You've taught me more in this past year than any school ever could." I had tears in my eyes, but they were different now. Not from grief, but from gratitude. I had made it through. Depression is not a story that ends with fireworks. It's a quiet, patient climb. Some days you fall, some days you pause, but some days, beautiful days, you rise. If you're reading this and you're where I was, feeling like you've lost everything, please hear me. Your value is not tied to your job, your salary, or the approval of others. You are more than what you produce. You are more than a role. You are a whole person, worthy of love, even in your darkest hour. I'm Jonathan Miller. I'm 53 now, and though I was once broken, I am not lost, not anymore.